Tonight we're seriously sexed up. Stark naked underneath their clothes are the sultry Suzi Ruffell. The sensual Sara Pascoe. The stimulating Ahir Shah. And old sexy pants himself, Alan Davis. Right. Let's hear you giving me the come on. Suzi goes. Oh, right. Sarah goes.
I believe in miracles. Where you from? You sexy thing, you.
Ahir goes.
Sex bomb, you're my sex bomb. Can you give it to me when I need to come along?
He's still got it, hasn't he? Really has. And Alan goes.
Tell you after.
Yeah.
Yes, all right.
Just rubbing it in.
Several months of lockdown
Yeah.
in a family of 5 with a dog.
Yeah, it's
That's
fine.
just a fantasy.
Who struggles to speak to people of the opposite sex?
Oh. Is it the QI elves?
Oh, who doesn't would be my answer.
Yeah, well, there is that. Let me rephrase it. Who seems to speak a different language to the opposite sex?
મને ખબર નથી તો શું કહે છે?
That's fantastic, and I'll speak Danish. Well, actually, interestingly, that is a sort of clue. So you say something to me.
હા બોલું છું હા.
Yeah, I'm Dick, it got. OK, that is a clue.
I think that a war has just broken out between India and Denmark and neither of us.
No, finally, a peace accord.
After many years, the upset over butter has been solved.
It's called ghee!
Oh, sorry, it's on. Oh, we started it again. So the Urbang people of Nigeria, they have separate language variations for men and women. So it's a farming community, population of about 11,000 people in what's called the Cross River area of Nigeria. And they have a wonderful creation myth which states that there were first two people on Earth, a bit like Adam and Eve, Urbang and Iwame, and God gave them a language each. And the intention was to give all tribes on Earth 2 languages, one for each sex, and then God ran out of languages. You know how that happens? Or it's possible that he made one more language than he made tribes and thought, I cannot make another tribe.
Oh. Do they say that it makes things easier? Do they prefer it that way?
They don't find it confusing at all. And if you have a look at some of the words, for example, some of them are completely different, and some of them are rather similar. For example, let's have a look at the word for clothing. The women's word, ariga, and the man's word are very, very different.
Yeah.
But then if you look at the word for book, koshang and oshang, they're rather similar.
Yeah.
Apparently the women's version is easier to pick up. They do less puns, which I like.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
But all children grow up speaking the female language, and the boys transition to the male language about the age of 10.
So, on your 10th birthday, your dad takes you to one side and says...
No, my boy.
Ayam's actually in it, Tom.
Yes, No, from about the age of 3 or 4, they begin to be teased for using women's words. But by 10, you would not dream, if you were a boy, of using any of the women's words. And they don't have any gendered pronouns. Their word O means both his and hers, and they don't assign gender to words, like the French will do. Actually, about a third of the world's population speak a gendered language where inanimate objects are male or female.
I really love that.
Do you?
Yeah.
I think it influences how people think about the thing they're talking about.
And it makes you think of them as, like, nice gentlemen and ladies. Like, especially Mrs. Teapot.
Yes.
Mr. Coatstand.
A survey of people that own, do you know one of those robotic vacuum cleaners?
I've got one.
Is it a boy or a girl?
He's called Victor.
He! 2/3 assigned it a gender, and 3/4 call him he.
I think it's the legacy of the Henry.
I think it's because he wanders around aimlessly consuming everything he sets aside.
And he sometimes gets stuck in the corner, so yeah.
Very now and then. What's the sexiest thing you can do with a sausage-making machine?
Oh.
Is it doing like what they did in Ghost? Around it? That's the sexiest thing you can do? So one of you's doing it, and then there's someone behind you sort of doing it.
And what's really nice is if you do something sexy and then breakfast is ready.
Exactly.
The casing is the important
Not
bit.
a condom.
Yes, darling, a condom is exactly...
a sausage machine.
Right, yeah. So the US condom industry began in 1883. There was a German-Jewish immigrant called Julius Schmidt, and he was... I mean, it's a terrible story. He was virtually penniless. He was hobbling around on crutches. It's quite Dickensian, in a way. And he was working at a sausage-making factory. And he started selling the animal intestines as condoms. I mean, who thought that's the next progress?
I want a Hamilton about that guy.
I think...
Great set with all intestines.
Anyway, he was arrested in 1890 because peddling in contraceptives was illegal.
But couldn't he just be like, this officer, this isn't a contraceptive?
Yes, it's a delicious snack. Yeah.
This is in America.
In America in the 1890s. He changed the name of his products to French Goods and Medicines.
French.
Because the French are sexy.
And then by 1918, condoms become legal. And by then, he was already king of the condom. The sheaths in the 18th century were made of... This is horrible. Just warning, this is quite unpleasant. They were made of sheep's guts, so they needed to be... Yes. Is that... Who wants that coming at them? Nobody. So it was sheep's guts, soaked for a couple of hours before use, and then tied on with a ribbon, and then washed, dried, and used again.
Yeah, I know you think it's gross, but that is a lot better than a kid you don't want.
It's eco-friendly as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd have a look, and I thought, I wonder what other things you can use a condom for. And I love the internet, because there was a list. Anybody have any thoughts of what you might use a condom for, other than the purpose for which it was designed?
Keeping things dry, like, for example, your phone.
Yeah, your
I'm always
watch.
dropping mine in the loo.
Yeah.
But you would look weird getting that out of your pocket.
Yes.
Well, like you thought your phone was vibrating, but it was actually just ribbed.
Very good for opening a tricky jar.
Are they? That is a good tip.
Yeah.
My nan always had trouble with jars.
It's also very good for retrieving things from the toilet. If you drop your phone and you hadn't got it in a condom, you could use the condom to put your hand down the toilet.
Yes, because people don't like to put their hand in the loo, do they?
See? Here's my two favourites. Sneaking booze in anywhere. A good condom will hold up to 6 pints of alcohol.
They're going to find that if they search you, though.
And this one, which is my favourite, came off an American website. You can cook a delicious meatloaf.
Yeah. In a condom?
Yeah, you put the meat in the condom and they tie it and boil it, and it apparently like boiling the bag thing.
Wow.
Yes.
Boiling the bag, yes,
I know.
good.
See? Other things that people use when they don't have a condom.
There was a rumour at my school that you could use a crisp packet.
Yeah, or a Tesco's carry bag.
Yeah, so cling film, sandwich bags, crisp packets. I don't know if you turn them inside out or the salty... Who gets the salty side? Oh. Speaking of cling film, who suffers from the shrink wrap effect?
Sex bomb.
It's the hip-hop remake of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
I love that. Shrink wrap. Yes, I'm going to give you a point, but it's wrong. You don't care, do you?
No.
Points are points. Take it.
So 1995, the Reichstag building, which is in Berlin, of course, was wrapped in 100,000 square metres of silver fabric, 2 weeks by two artists called Christo Ijavachev and Jean-Claude Denat de Guimont. The married couple who worked on the name of Christo. Can I say the building was not in use at the time?
A couple of people in there.
Yeah.
Help!
What was the artist's reason?
They described it as autobiographical, apparently. There is another thing in terms of the shrink wrap effect, which I do think is very interesting. Paleontologists have really struggled to tell the sex of a dinosaur by its fossils, OK? Because, you know, there's pretty much all the tissue has decayed over the millennia and so on. And when artists specialising in prehistoric animals have drawn them, they've rather assumed that the skin is tight on the carcass, OK? So it gives them this sort of slightly skeletal, slightly menacing look. If you think about it, there seem to be no fat dinosaurs, do they? And lots of dinosaurs had feathers. Some might have had bulging muscles. So you get this effect. And there's a wonderful book called All Yesterdays, and it has a look at what we might think modern-day animals would look like if we only had the skeletons and we did the sort of shrink-wrap effect. So have a look at this one. Would anybody know what that might be?
A hippo.
It is a hippo, yeah, absolutely.
My God.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And it's about how we cannot possibly know what things might have looked like.
Except that does look like a hippo.
What do you think about hippos, then? They're sort of enormous, aren't they?
I love hippos. There's one in the zoo in Spain where we go on holiday, and it was 3,000 kilograms. You can hardly believe it.
Oh, on holiday, I can totally believe it. Just a little bit more tapas, you know what it's like. And have a look at these, see what you think these are.
flamingos or
Yeah.
something. Ostriches?
Swans.
Swans? Actually, I think that is what a swan soul looks like.
Yeah.
My dog fights a lot with swans, and they always win. Because that is what's underneath those beautiful wings.
Those arms are amazing.
I saw a completely black swan the other day. It was beautiful. I'd never seen one before. Is it? I think they're quite. Well, I think they're quite rare. I don't know.
Quite rare here.
I sent photos to all my friends, so I hope they were rare.
Sandy's seen a swan. Did it fly off with her? No.
Now, why would your mother-in-law give you one of these?
Oh, because she's finally ready for the home. This is the last straw. Happy Christmas, Sarah. All right, Mary.
Is it because she knows I'm in training for world's greatest potato peeler?
Why do you say that?
Because it looks like a really difficult to peel potato.
OK, so I will not be able to say this correctly, and my apologies to anybody Peruvian. Pusi kakon wakaki. It translates the name of this potato to make your daughter-in-law cry.
That is so mean.
Yeah. So we're talking about the Cusco region of the Peruvian highlands, and a future mother-in-law gives the bride-to-be these potatoes, and if she can successfully peel them... Yes, quite right.
That is clever.
Then she will make a good wife. I mean, how annoying is that, right?
So you'd be a lovely wife.
Who couldn't perform without an audience?
I mean, I would say me, but Edinburgh 2012 would... you know, me, my mum, my auntie and the critic from the Sunday Times.
I once did a show with Helen Lederer and Tony Slattery, and there was one person in the audience, and we had a long debate as to whether or not to do it or not.
Or one of you could sit down.
We did. It was my mother-in-law, and she'd come specially.
And then afterwards she was like, you went through with the performance, very impressed by that, now if you can peel this...
I was booked for a fundraiser once for firemen, and it was in a field near the fire station, and no one was in the tent. So they made me start without anyone in the tent, because they said that when people hear that there's something happening, they'll come and look in.
Oh, my...
So, and because it was a fundraiser, I did do it. But all that happened is that people would periodically just look inside the tent and go, oh, God. But no one goes, oh, brilliant. I'll go and listen to that mad woman talking to herself.
Oh, brilliant. Partway through an anecdote.
Yeah.
What was the place, darling? We went to a festival, and there was a completely empty field, and I went to the toilet. When I came back, it was full.
Latitude.
Latitude Festival. There was nobody there. And I just thought, well, nobody's coming. I went to the toilet, came back, it was 5,000 people had turned up.
Yeah, Alan had texted everyone Toxfigs about, and she said, two-siders.
She's in the loo, come out now.
She's got that swan anecdote.
So, who couldn't perform without an audience? It's not a comedian. So we're talking about sex...
Or sexual performance. So people who like being watched, like as a thing, like
Sex.
camming or something.
Like a...
Right,
yeah.
what?
Camming? So some people make their living from having webcam at home, and people give them money for all, and they do those things in their room. And some of it can be quite mundane, like folding or ironing. It's mostly not, but it can be absolutely anything. And you spend time with people just through your webcam all
Where
day.
do you find this? Just...
There's a thing called the internet, actually. It's really taken off, Sandy.
So I said to my son the other day, I said, darling, people keep saying there's porn on the internet, but I can't find it. He said, Mum, just type in the word porn. And I said, oh, I don't think I could be that bold. He said, maybe it's not for you.
I mean, Sandy, what were you putting in before? To not be able to find it?
Well, I don't know, I just thought it just popped up all by itself.
It only pops up if you've already been on it.
Oh.
It doesn't just seek out.
My mother is a retired primary school teacher, and when they brought interactive whiteboards into the class, she was trying to teach the children about the Victorians, and so went on Google Images and typed in Prince Albert, and this interactive whiteboard.
Even I know what that is.
Close! How do you make it close?
Yeah, and then pop-ups.
Yeah. Prince Albert is the closest we've got to somebody who couldn't perform without an audience.
Is it like a thing where, for royalty, you had to prove that you've consummated the marriage?
You had to be watched.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. So Henry VI was King of England 1422 to 1461, and his wife Margaret of Anjou. They took more than 8 years to produce an heir, and there were all sorts of rumours that he was impotent or that she kept refusing.
A lot of sheep going missing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that condom on his desk looks uncomfortable, but they've discovered new evidence to suggest that courtiers had to accompany them to bed to make sure that they did the deed. The Chamberlain of Henry VI used to stay in the room while they were in bed together.
On his phone.
They did finally have a baby, Edward, but it was thought to either be a bastard or a changeling. People used to believe that it was a fairy or a devil child swapped in. They were married, actually, for a year before they met. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. So the Duke of Suffolk, who was Henry's advisor, went over to France 1444 and married Margaret in his place. It used to be called a proxy wedding.
That's the most Indian shit I've ever heard.
Well, tell me what you think about this, because it wasn't just weddings that were conducted in absentia. Mary Tudor, who was the sister of Henry VIII, her marriage to Louis XII was consummated by proxy. Do you know about this?
Consummated by proxy?
Yes, consummated by proxy. So the Duke of Longueville, who was, at the time, a French hostage in England, he acted as a stand-in for Louis for the consummation, right? So there's a whole lot of spectators, and Mary gets her clothes off and she climbs into bed, and then the Duke takes off his stocking, his doublet and hose, from one leg, puts his naked leg in under the bedclothes and touches her with it, and everybody applauds, and that counts as having consummated the marriage.
Wow.
I don't understand straight people at all.
Why would you stop halfway through sleeping with someone?
The interval.
Weirdly correct.
Ah, yes, please.
The safety curtains.
And a little old lady comes out to sell ice cream.
I like that you thought that. But why might you have an interval? Why might there be a...
I mean, it's for snacks.
Snacks?
Yeah.
So, the tyranny of the 8 hours of sleep, which we have now, is a relatively modern concept. In the medieval period, people had two-phase sleeping patterns, so they'd wake up around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and they would use that midway break for praying, for eating, for sex, for studying, for writing poetry, or whatever.
That was the part of the day where you actually got to do anything that was just for pleasure, because you worked so hard and you had to work with daylight.
My dad sort of does that. He'll go to bed quite early and then wakes up about 3, then quite often takes my mum a cup of tea. And I said to her, doesn't it really annoy you that you're being woken up? And she went, nah, I always like a tea.
But it was called split sleeping, and it was very common, so the 17th to the 19th century, and then it kind of faded away. But there's a new thing that has sometimes been suggested, polyphasic sleeping. There was an architect and inventor called Buckminster Fuller, and he managed to reduce his sleep in total, there he is, to 2 hours in every 24.
It's really bad for you.
It's very bad for you. He did this by having a half-hour nap whenever he got tired, so kind of every 6 hours he'd have a half-hour
and he absolutely
nap.
talked gibberish and had mice and cats in his peripheral vision, but other than that, it worked really well.
So Buckminster Fuller believed that, so particularly in the 1940s, that if people slept less, it would shorten the war because thinkers would be able to spend more time thinking and so on.
He thought it would shorten the war?
Because clever people would be able to come up with a better plan. He had a system which he called Dymaxion, which is a sort of portmanteau word, dynamic, maximum and tension. And some of the stuff is brilliant, darling. If you don't know him, there's a design he did for a car, which I still, if this car was available, I would absolutely buy it. I don't think it ever got made.
Is that it?
Yeah, the Dymaxion car.
You would look adorable in that car, Sandy.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic.
It's still better, I think, to have the wheels at the corners.
The idea was to maximise efficiency. He gave up after 2 years because nobody else was awake when he wanted to talk.
The thing with modern people, especially with stress, is that people feeling tired all the time. It's like, you're not crazy, you are. Your body isn't actually getting rest when you need it.
Well, Salvador Dali was always worried that he was too tired in the afternoons, and he didn't like wasting time napping, so he used to do this thing. He used to sit in an armchair with his arms hanging over the side like that, and he had a heavy metal key in his hand and an upturned plate on the floor. He could go like that, and then go like that. He nodded off and dropped the thing, and it landed on the plate. And he said it was enough, that jolt, to give him a bit more energy.
Is that how the clock ended up being bent?
That's exactly how it is. Yeah. Anyone know who that is on the right?
Is that Descartes?
It is Descartes, absolutely right.
God, you're out clever pants, aren't you?
You just knew all of the facts about sleep.
Yeah, they were boring. That was very impressive.
You're both really showing up my 4 GCSEs here.
Anyway, Descartes, the philosopher Rene Descartes, he would always sleep until midday, and it's something we think now called delay sleep phase type. It's a sleep disorder that throws off your circadian rhythm. Lots of people experience it temporarily, so students pulling an all-nighter, for example. But 1 in 500 people have it as a permanent condition, and they just don't seem to be in the right frame with everybody else.
But isn't that sort of all relative, right? Like, it's not the right frame for everybody else, but it is the right frame for him. So, I don't know, why does it need to be a medical condition? Why can't he just be like, I love sleeping in?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely fine, unless you're meeting somebody for breakfast or something. You're right. It's got to be the thing that works for you. I sleep, therefore I am. And with that, it's time for general ignorance. Fingers on buzzers, please. What shouldn't athletes do the night before a big sporting event?
Have sex.
No, there's no evidence that having sex affects your performance. In fact, if anything, it probably makes you more relaxed.
Lots of comics have that as well before a big gig, because it's relaxing.
You're shagging pre-gigs?
No, not immediately before. Like, ladies and gentlemen. No, but like, say, like the afternoon of, or, you know.
The late Paul Hunter, the professional snooker player, was very much down in the interval of the final of a major tournament, and afterwards said that, oh yeah, did plan B during the interval because he came back from really far behind and won, and him and his fiancée later revealed that B stood for bonk, and they just tagged in the interval, and he was like, right, ready to go play some snooker.
What's interesting, they've done lots of studies on this. They've done almost all the studies on male athletes. The key thing is that you're well rested. Drinking, not a good idea. Taking drugs, staying up late, none of those things. And the wonderful old manager, Casey Stengel of the New York Yankees, he says it's not the sex that wrecks these guys, it's staying up all night looking for it.
Yeah, I think that's where it came from, is that, especially with teams of men, when they were told, oh, it's bad luck to do it beforehand, that is what they meant, is don't go out, stay in your hotel room, be rested for tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the Olympic Village is like, you know...
Yeah, loads of STDs, they have to have special doctors.
2016, the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, they gave away 450,000 free condoms.
Yeah,
Were they the old-fashioned ones?
Yeah, there's a little page. Foreplay only improves match play. When were the first same-sex unions in England?
Sex bomb.
It's going to be something like 1167 or something.
Not quite as early as that.
1168.
So it's the golden age of piracy.
Oh.
It was a practice called Matlage, and it was a union between two male pirates, and they would share their wealth. They often exchanged rings, gold rings, to symbolise their union. They would put a clause to pass all their belongings on, their inheritance, if the person died. You get it about the 17th century. And on paper, it looks like it's about economics. But there is a book, can I just say, by historian B.R. Berg called Sodomy and the Pirate Tradition. And he said it's a relationship with clearly homosexual characteristics, and that's despite the fact that the death penalty was in place at the time for homosexuality. There's a famous case of this John Swan and Robert Culliford, who sailed under Captain Kidd. And, I mean, they sailed for ages before settling down, it's quite sweet, in neighbouring homes in Madagascar. Since the days of piracy, same-sex couples have been saying, I do. Who introduced Britons to the idea of clean-shaven nether regions?
Oh.
Is it Brazil?
Can I just say, I shared that picture in confidence.
That big toe looks like sort of model for a sourdough pizza or something. It's very unpleasant.
I'm right here!
Sorry! We've mentioned before, darling, that we know that the Brazilian wax was actually invented in New York in the 1990s.
Oh, was it something that happened, like, because people wanted to prevent, like, lice and stuff like that?
OK, so it's really interesting because it's such a long time ago. When Julius Caesar, that's how far back we're going, invaded Britain, so we're talking about 55, 54 BC, he described the inhabitants as completely clean-shaven from head to toe, save for the head, So they kept their hair long and the upper lip and so on. And there is a Welsh clergyman and historian called Gerald of Wales, and in 1188 he confirmed Britons were shaving their bodies and even their heads to allow them to run more freely through forest groves.
Yeah, my pubes really slow me down.
Yeah. They catch.
It's one of my big regrets, actually.
You could have been Zola Budd.
I know. Yeah. It could be like Velcro on nettles.
Yeah.
He said that the Welsh were most particular about shaving the lower parts of the body.
What did they shave with? Because it's difficult enough nowadays with fancy things.
Well, if you have a look at the stuff that's been discovered from the ancient Egyptians, I mean, there are proper gold and copper razors that have been found in their tombs.
Yeah, but they still look like you're going to have a lot of rash and cuts.
Well, around 2018, there was an extraordinary step forward, which you just think, really? 2018? The razor company Billy made news by becoming the first women's hair removal ad to show actual body hair being removed. And actually, if you think about it, every advert, pretty much...
It's a shaved leg.
It's an already shaved leg having another shave.
Yeah, and then it makes you feel like a real freak, like, oh, I actually want it for her.
Why should you be careful about hair removal if you're a cyclist?
Oh, because they're supposed to think that you are supposed to do hair removal to be more aerodynamic. That's quite popular, isn't it, with cyclists?
Is it now considered doping?
You actually need it. It protects against friction, and it also helps to remove sweat from the rider's skin.
Oh.
But swimmers remove their hair, don't they?
And their coats.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and boots. Yeah.
Phelps still wearing his coat and boots.
Take your coat off.
Duffel, get the
Take your
duffel.
coat off.
Yeah, leave the hat, leave the
Just
hat.
leave it there, it doesn't matter where.
Brazilians should really be called the Welsh wax. How often do men think about sex?
OK, I'm going to say 6 times a day. That's my estimate.
I'm going to say every 3 seconds.
Wow.
I'm going to say somewhere between 6 times a day and every 3 seconds.
3 seconds is so fast that you couldn't even have finished about the time you were just thinking about it.
You could give it a good old go.
I mean, you'd never get any sleep, I think, is the thing.
No, and there was no time then to think about football.
But presumably there isn't that much difference between women and men with this.
Well, there is a slight difference. So, the Ohio State University did a study on this, the researchers in 2012. They gave out, well, you know those sort of clickers? It's like a golf tally.
Like you can come in, you can come in, we're full.
Yeah, exactly, one of those. They had 3 things on it. You had to click one for sex and one for food and one for sleep. So there are 3 different sort of buttons on it. On average, men thought about sex 19 times a day, only once more than they thought about food. On the whole, women thought about sex 10 times a day, but food 15 times. But the interesting thing, the best predictor of who logged the most frequent thoughts about sex were people who were the most comfortable with their sexuality. So the more comfortable they were about sex, the more they thought about it. Like all of these people, terribly anxious about them.
Yeah.
I think, terribly anxious about them.
Ah, the bookish little teenagers.
They did a different study in Germany. Participants, male and female, were texted 7 times a day asking what they'd been thinking about recently. In the daytime, people thought about coffee, checking emails, watching TV, much more than they thought about sex. And sex only became a dominant thought somewhere around midnight. But
Who's
even
still
then,
awake?
Yeah, I know, right? I'm in the first phase of my sleep. And even then, it came second to the thought that I wish I was asleep. So, you know. If you claim you think about sex every 3 seconds, you're statistically an outlier. Possibly an outright liar. And now that we've put that to bed, it's time for the scores. In last place, locked out of the bedroom with -16. Oh, it's Alan.
Locked out of the bedroom.
In 3rd place with -6, it's Suzi. In sloppy 2nd, but with a +7, Ahir. And the winner with a full 8 points, it's Sara. My thanks to Ahir, Sara, Suzi and Alan. And I leave you with this sex-related sign-off from Tracy Ullman. As I get older, I just prefer to knit. Good night.